Welcome, fellow bookworms, to Tibra's Den. My name is Whitney, and today I have an update on my ABC Author Challenge. We are going to be talking about The Origin by Irving Stone. So this is one of my I authors. The other I author was Isabel Allende because I couldn't find an author with the last name I at the thrift store, so I went with first name. And per my rules, if I do the first name, then I have to do two authors. But yeah, this is all about Charles Darwin. The first half of the book is about him sailing around the world for the 5 years he was away, discovering new plants and animals and such. And then the second half is the whole rest of his life, which I didn't realize that going in. I thought it was kind of about the 5 years of him sailing, but yeah, it goes throughout his whole life. So we're going to talk about this one in just a second. As always, though, before I do, if you could go ahead and remember to give this video a like, it really does help out the channel. And don't forget to subscribe and hit the bell notification so you don't miss out on a thing. But let's talk about The Origin. I really, really enjoyed the first part of this book, and by the end, I was pushing myself through it. So, like I said, I expected it to be mainly about based on the synopsis, him sailing the seas and, all his discovery and such, which the first portion is. And the first portion is amazing. This book is very dense. It's 762 pages, 764 with the acknowledgments, but very, very dense. It's not quite as bad as The Tenants of Time, because The Tenants of Time, the writing was packed in there, but it was also tall and wide, and it's hardcover and everything. Where this one, it's dense, the writing's packed in there, but you can see it's like a normal size paperback. And so this one wasn't quite as long, but it was still very dense, and still you had to be present while you were reading it in order to retain anything. And so it was a little bit of a struggle to get through, even though it was very, very enjoyable. So I marked some pages I'm going to talk about and whatnot. But yeah, I think, like I said, the first half where he's on the seas and you really get a sense of who Charles Darwin was as a person. And Irving Stone, in the beginning, he mentions that he spent 5 years researching for this book. And the family, the descendants of Charles Darwin, gave him access to like papers and such that he needed. And so he did a lot of research, and that really shows in this book. And so yeah, you got this really good sense of who Charles Darwin was as a person. There are a lot of characters introduced in this book. He met a lot of people throughout his lifetime, and I really, really wish that a character list had been included. Like that would have been so, so helpful, especially some of the characters on the boat. Like I couldn't keep them straight at all. So I really didn't worry about that. So when one of them would come up, like I didn't know who it was. I knew it was somebody that dealt with the boat, and then later on, that those characters, like I didn't have a clue. I couldn't keep them straight. So, and some of them had the same names too, which made it really hard too. So like you had two Fannies, I think Fanny Owen, and then I forget which the other Fanny is. And one, was one he was interested in marrying, and then when he left, she was like went off and married somebody else. And then you had a Fanny that was kind of part of the family. Um, and so in the beginning, that got confusing as well until it was at the end. So, like I said, one critique on this book is like I wish that it had included a character list, so you could just reference it real quick and go, okay, this was, the captain of whatever, whatnot. So I will say that, but other than that, like if you don't focus too much on the characters, your mind can definitely get bogged down in all the details in this book. But we don't focus too hard on that and just kind of enjoy the story, you'll pick up enough. You don't really need to know all the people at all. So, but yeah, so he goes through all that, and then he ends up, coming back to England, and then it goes on through kind of him cataloging all the specimens and such, and then he starts researching like barnacles and such. And those part I was kind of getting bored with, but it held enough interest that I was able to kind of keep going. And then by the end of the book, though, I was just kind of done. I really had to push myself through to get to the end. My husband was kind of laughing at me because I had 13 pages left, and I had been reading like it all day. Because I had like two sections of the book. Because the way it's broken down, so you have two parts. So you part one and part two, and then in the parts you have books. And so you have book one, book two, etc. And then the books are broken down by chapters. Well, I was trying to break it down by book, so I would try to read a book in a sitting. Um, and some of them were just long. Like most of them were around 40 pages, which 40 pages doesn't seem like a whole lot. In this book, it is. Like it would take me most of the day to read 40 pages. And so if it was a longer, book, which would be like 70 pages, 80 pages, I would kind of break that in half or try to. Well, the last section I just wanted to get through. So I think it was like 50 pages or 60 pages, 50 or 60, and then I think like 40. So I was down to the last 13, and I probably should have just saved it for the next day, but I just wanted to be done. Because by that point I was just like, I don't need to know all these minute details of his life. And it was kind of repetitive. He would kind of have these bouts of illness, and then he would go do a hydropathy. Um, and, and then he would heal, and then he'd go back to writing whatever book he was writing. So it was really, really repetitive. And I think that part could have been shortened down a lot. And some of the descriptions, especially of like the characters, or not, I mean, it's real people, but like the people he's meeting and such, when they're introduced, like he goes into full descriptive mode, the author does, of what these people looked like. And I get he was trying to capture like the styles, like the hairstyles and everything of that time period. But it just got really repetitive. And like I said, I couldn't retain who was who anyway. So I didn't really need a description of them because I wasn't going to remember that Thomas Huxley looked like this or anything like that. I couldn't even remember who Thomas Huxley was in relation to Charles Darwin. So just little things like that. The book could have been shortened for sure, but the author is very descriptive, which worked, especially the first half of the book. When you need that descriptiveness, it just didn't work so well in the second half. But you learn a lot about Charles Darwin, and it is very interesting. Like, I mean, I didn't know that they had 10 children, seven who lived, but yeah, 10 children. I mean, that's just amazing. And there's kind of this inside joke about how he's kind of viewed as a hypochondriac. So that comes up over and over again. Like he thinks, his friends are gonna view him as a hypochondriac, and then he's like kind of uses that to his advantage. And there's kind of this joke that he lost half an inch from the boat because he's tall and lanky, and he gets shoved into this little hammock in the boat, so he loses half an inch. So at the end, that joke kind of resurfaces, and it's kind of an inside joke, so it makes you feel like you're in the group essentially. But yeah, pretty enjoyable. Even like I said, the second half was as long winded as it was. There are still moments where you're like interested in what Charles Darwin is doing. And then, like I said, it wasn't towards the end where it kind of got repetitive and such. But really, really, really good. I'm gonna kind of go over. I mean, I marked not too many pages. I just kind of tried to read and enjoy. But I did mark several. Like Charles Darwin was very against slavery, and that kind of caused issues with between him and the boat captain, who was very temperamental. And it was kind of sad, like some of the relationships and how they turned, because I knew going in that Charles Darwin's work was controversial. I didn't realize just how controversial it was, and it was interesting to see how people like kind of turned on him a little bit, and then those that didn't agree with him, like his wife, did not agree with him at all. Like she's very religious, but she stood by him. And so that was really, really interesting to see. But yeah, he was against slavery, so that kind of comes up, when he's traveling to these different countries and seeing that. And I like how it touched on different events from a different viewpoint. Like, we see the Civil War differently as Americans than, probably English people and such. And so we kind of got that viewpoint from somebody who was alive while it was going on. And he, didn't agree with slavery. So he was on the side of the North and such, and how that could cause issues. And then the Tenets of Time, was about the Fenian Rising and the land wars and such. And it's touched on in here as well because it was that same time period that he was living. And so it was kind of fun. And there was other things that happened too that I just wasn't as familiar with, but it's kind of fun seeing that perspective, from somebody who's English born and maybe not quite involved, but kind of getting that perspective from somebody that was born during that or living during that time, but is a little bit of an outsider was interesting to me. So the first page I kind of started to go over. He's just basically going through his journal and such. He's home now and he's going through his journal, and he kind of it's a brief synopsis basically of his time. Traveling the seas. Obviously, we got a good look at it, going through it, with him throughout the book. But it says the room was utterly still. Charles' voice was pleasant to listen to, with a variation of tone and excellent articulation. He started with the pages early on, the luxuriance of the Brazilian jungle, the incredible setting of Rio de Janeiro, the moon shining on the glassy waters when they were becalmed, the schools of porpoises crossing the bow of their vessel, the luminous sea with the vessel driving between two billows of liquid phosphorescence, the ferociousness of the waves and their wind at Cape Horn, the savages of Tierra del Fuego and their failure to leave a missionary there, his description of the gauchos and their independent way of life, the catastrophic earthquake at Concepcion, his 23-day trip with Mariano Gonzalez through the staggering ranges of the Andes, the eccentricities and lavish wildlife of the Galapagos Islands, where a man could see nature exactly as it was thousands of years before, and the beauty of the wildly colored coral reefs and the fishes that live among them. So, I mean, that's just a brief glimpse at his overall journey. But I really wanted to share that because it just, like I said, it kind of captures very briefly, that journey and just the awe that he experienced, throughout it. So, and then the next one I marked, it was 1865, and at this point, a lot of his colleagues and friends and such are dying. They're older and whatnot, but the boat captain, which we got to kind of know in the beginning of the book, Fitzroy, he was kind of hot headed, and him and Charles got along fairly well, but he was hot headed, and so later on, when Charles starts to write about the origin of species and such, and it's very, very controversial, him and Fitzroy eventually have a falling out. And so I really like this section because, um let's see here. So it says, "No, I'm not pleased that I have one enemy less," he decided, as though answering his own question. "My mind goes back to those wonderful years on the Beagle when he gave me friendship and abetted my exploration. He was a friend then, and he shall remain so in my memory." And I really like that because it's like, yes, a lot of things pass between them, and it just again kind of shows you Charles Darwin and his character, because so much passed between them during this time. Like, they had issues on the boat, but overall got along really well. And then Fitzroy, I mean, he turned on Charles, and so for him, to not hold a grudge against that or anything like that, but just look fondly on the memories he had with Fitzroy. I thought that was really cool, and like I said, it really kind of shows the character of Charles Darwin. And then the other one I marked was about the Fenians because, like I said, I read The Tenets of Time, and these books gave me very similar vibes as far as writing style and whatnot. And like this one's biographical fiction, or that one's more historical fiction. But yeah, I mean, it's just like you got a really good sense of Charles Darwin. I thought the author did a fantastic job, even though by the end I was over it. And I did not expect, at the end it goes through Charles Darwin's whole life, so it talks about when he ends up passing away, and I really did not expect to um get teary eyed at that point in the book. I did not expect it at all, but I definitely did. It was such a journey going along through Charles Darwin's life, and so I definitely got teary eyed. Like obviously, I knew it was coming. Like I mean, he's been dead how long? So, but yeah, there's humor in this book, like I said, and then you really get a good look at the personality of Charles Darwin and the man, that he was, past the origin, and why he took that chance even though it was controversial and such. So if you're interested in learning more about Charles Darwin, I think this is a great one to pick up. And I definitely think it's worth the read. Like I said, I know I struggled in the end there, but 100% would read it again. So that's all my thoughts on the origin. I'm looking forward to continuing on. I don't think I have any more like dense books like that. So I'm really looking forward to hopefully moving along quickly through the rest of the challenge. But I'm gonna go ahead and leave you guys here. If you've read The Origin, definitely let me know down below, or if you have any other books on Charles Darwin that you might recommend, let me know in the comments below. But I'm gonna go ahead and leave you guys here. Happy reading, everyone. Bye.